stuck here. The cops won't bother me. Hey guys, today we are going to be adjusting the valves on my Kymco Xciting RI ABS. And I have never done the valve adjustments on this bike, so it's going to be a learning process. If you guys recall, I bought this as a non-running bike, and currently I'm waiting for parts, but I decided to try and do the valve adjustment on this. This uses a lock nut sort of adjustment, so it's relatively easy. Now the downside is that these Kymcos, I've seen that several people online have taken the engine and had to push it back in order to slide the top case of the engine out, and I am not looking forward to that, and I am hoping that I can figure out another way to pull out that cover without removing the bolts for the engine. You just have to loosen the bolts for the engine, but to me that's a really bad design flaw, so I really don't want to do that. But I am going to try and do it. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to do it. The valve adjustment clearances for the intake and the exhaust are completely the same. The intake is 0.1 millimeter and the exhaust is 0.1 millimeter. And in inches it translates to 0.004 inches. But it's kind of nice, it's the same. And I don't think this bike has ever had the valves adjusted, so it's probably a good idea to do it. So on this right side of the engine, this is where you have your spot, so you can check out where top dead center is. There's a little cover here, and you use a flat screwdriver to get at it. Just going to unscrew it. If it's on tight, make sure you use a large screwdriver to pull it out. And here we go. There's also an O-ring in there, but it's actually in the case itself. The things that confuse me about the service manual on this bike is that there is usually like a crankshaft bolt behind there, and you can even see the recess of the engine case behind. But on this Kymco Xciting RI ABS, it does not have that. So a lot of times in a regular motorcycle, you can just move the rear wheel. You can actually like see the timing marks going in. Like you could actually see top dead center there. But the problem is this is not the way you do it for a scooter. So you have to get on the left side. This is your transmission, but also in this cover, I believe we should be able to pull it out. And I'm trying to see if there's it's already kind of cracked over there. These 10 millimeters, that holds this bracket here. This one, move these. Whoa, and there we go. At least we got this out. One of the things I like doing is putting the bolts in the plastic in the general location, just because when I go back to put this, what tends to happen is like I'll lose things. On this left side, that bolt is what we want to access. This lets you turn the engine over, and you want to always go clockwise, never counterclockwise. So the key is you have this system, you move it, and then you go to the other side into that side port, and you look for top dead center. This is the case that we need to remove, but the problem is that it's very close to the steel bar. It's very badly designed, and I really don't like it when motorcycles are designed in such a way that it makes it so much more difficult to work on. And by the way, these plugs, I'm not even sure where they belong to. They're just on the engine, like it's kind of strange that Kymco just has some random plugs and there's nothing to connect them to. We're going to have to remove all of this. The first thing we're going to have to do is remove the spark plug. I've already removed the spark plug, so you can just use a socket, remove your spark plug, and remove the coil. So we want to just make the most amount of space so we can work. And I do want to remove the thermostat and move it backwards, because I think that might be better, and I might be able to slide the engine case if I remove the tubes and everything. This side of the engine we have this hose. We're going to remove that. And then sometimes the hose is very tight on there. So if it's too tight, just take a pair of pliers and just take it like this and kind of squeeze it. And that's pretty much all you need to do. Try and remove the thermostat housing backwards. But I think I'm gonna have to drain this entire thing because I'm hoping that I do not have to push the engine back. The coolant should be popping out pretty soon. There we go. Should be able to move this housing backwards like that. Coolant temperature. And I also suspect this could be one of the issues, but so you'll use 10 millimeter, and then another one here, and then 2 at the bottom. So without an extension, you could reach these here. And there is like a cross pattern to unbolting these. So, and then we can just push it back. So that's the bottom one. From this right side, you can actually just squeeze this here without the use of removing the thermostat for now. And you know, you never hear about this sort of talk when you're reading reviews from motorcycle companies or journalists, because they never do it. But if you're a guy like me that works on his own bikes, it's kind of important to have a bike that's very easy to maintain and doesn't require a lot of work. So when I look for stuff for my own, if I'm going to keep a bike for a while, I just want to be able to maintain it without having to take it to a shop. And I don't think this Kymco is a long-term sort of bike. It's just way too difficult to work on. So many things they could have done to make it easier. Moving the tank back, moving the motor back, changing the frame. Like, one of the things that they could have engineered better was making this subframe brace and either moved it front or moved it backwards, or even made it so you could remove a bolt here and move this out. But when these makers, they don't think about the consumer like this, it makes me think they're not a very good company. Finally, I got this bolt out. This was very difficult to get because there's not a lot of leverage here. There's hoses in the way. Definitely make sure that you don't lose these 4 bolts. These are the ones on top of the engine. They're very specific. So we have to remove the crank or the top of this. But the problem is, I don't know if I'm able to squeeze it past the thermostat. Why would they do this to people? Oh man, I think I do have to remove the, look at that. Jesus, why would any designer make such a flawed system like this? Alright, I'm going to try removing this bracket here. A bracket for the thermostat. Make sure you hold on to that nut. Then let's remove this bracket. The thing, if I do that, I might have to damage the gasket. What a terrible design. So it's almost out of the socket here, or almost out. But the problem is I don't want to damage this gasket that's here. One of the things I'm finding is that Kymco takes a very long time to get you parts. So this is not the thing you want to do. I mean, I'm just so disappointed in the engineering of this bike. Anyway, there's a bolt right here that attaches to the engine. We're going to loosen that. We're just going to squeeze on here. You might have to use a breaker bar, or I guess not. So there we go. That's so there we go. You can see now it's loose. A 22 millimeter wrench you're going to get in here, and that's going to be one of the motor mounts. So this is the bolt that you have to loosen. And now we have another one on the other side. This is the shaft or whatever. It's a big axle that runs from the right to left side, and you loosen this. That way the engine can move freely backwards. Hopefully this is going to be a simple way of getting it out. Having one hand to do this is very difficult, guys, but it'll eventually, I think, come out. It's just a matter of a little finesse here. More. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. It's like I'm moving the entire bike. My God, this is just the worst design I've ever seen. It's like a whole body exercise thing here. Oh man, this is such... If I had an extra pair of hands, I probably would not be removing these hoses. There we go. And now that's off. Again, this is not a normal occurrence, having to do all of this just to... This might be the way of the world with these maxi scooters, but I think working on this bike has made me realize I don't want a maxi scooter. If maxi scooters are all about doing this sort of maintenance. No, it has to come up. Shit. Oh my God, this is such a pile of shit. Oh my God, I finally got it. Oh, terrible design. Oh my, and it's still stuck. Jesus. Oh, man. This is... So this is the valve cover gasket. This is probably the worst designed motorcycle when it comes to maintenance I've ever had. This is just so frustrating to work on. Man, what a terrible design. Now, if you look down here, this is where the valves are. And if I use the crank to rotate now, you should be able to see the lobes and the shims and all of that moving. And the way you figure it out is by getting on that right side and looking for the T mark. This hole, that is what you're looking for. You're looking inside and you are looking for a T. It might be a little bit hard to see, but there is a, it's called a punch mark. There's a little hole in that hole on both sides, and it needs to be facing this way. This is the exhaust side, but you see that little tiny dot up here? It needs to be facing up. So if that dot is down here, you have to rotate the crankshaft again until it's to the top. At this point, you could actually take the measurements of the valves and adjust it. Feeler gauges, and the feeler, you know, there is a technique to valve adjustment. It basically all by feel. So the key is you stick one of these metal shims underneath, and you should be able to kind of feel a slight drag. This one is the one we're going to be using, and it's kind of funny because the measurement is right here in inches and in millimeters. 1 millimeter or 0.004, and that's what you need for both of the intake and the exhaust. On different bikes there is different sizes that you have to measure. This is the exhaust side, and the way you can tell is that there's two per side. One is the intake, one is the exhaust. And you see, it's very difficult to see it on camera, but there's a piece of metal, I guess the rocker arm, and what you measure is the measurement here. You put that shim here, and you should be able to slide it in with a drag. So that's why they call it a feeler gauge. All right, so I'm actually in the other one and I'm dragging it. It's very difficult because it's just the position of it. If it's too tight or too loose, what you do is you undo this bolt and then you use this to adjust it. Again, this is a very badly designed system. I'm looking at it. Normally you have like a screw and you can reach it from the top, but this is just so difficult. You'd have to reach it from this hole. This is probably one of the worst designed engine systems I've seen. They did not do anything to help the consumer. I can drag it in, and yeah, I can drag it in. This convoluted way of adjusting the valves, they don't even have a lock. Like most of the time you can reach the valves using a Phillips screwdriver to adjust it, and then you tighten the nut. But you can't even get a regular socket in here. You require special tools to get it in there. You don't want to get special tools for a simple process of valve adjustment. In my opinion, if I knew about this sort of thing, and this is what I expect a lot from magazine reviewers, I want them to talk about this sort of thing because this would put me off from buying a motorcycle. If I knew a motorcycle was this complex and this difficult to do a simple job, I would not buy it. So if Kymco decided to go with just a different style of this rocker arm and a different position of the rocker arm and not use the square nut to adjust the valve lash, it would make things a whole lot simpler. Alrighty guys, it is time to put back the cover gasket, and it could rip because this is such a tight. Kymco could have just moved this bracket. I mean, how bad of an engineers do you have that you have to put it right at this point? Why can't you just move it off to the side? Make sure that gasket is not getting bunched up. Oh, I actually got it in. Oh man. Look at this gasket to make sure that it's not binding on the engine. It's really important. If you somehow have a kink in there, and even look from the very bottom, make sure that it's in there extremely well. There is a pattern that you should follow. Don't tighten a bolt too much. You want to kind of go around a little bit at a time. These are the things that motorcycle makers should really be paying attention to, but nobody cares about ease of maintenance. Okay, so I'm not really tightening this. I'm just putting it in a little bit, and once it starts to squeeze in, I'm just going to take it out. I'm just going to complain about this bike for the rest of the time. It's kind of like what happened with me with BMWs. Once I got my first BMW, I was like, what the hell do people see in this? Once it gets resistance, you can just move on to the other one. The idea is not to adjust things too tight, and there are torque. I think it's 9 Newton meters. Now at this point, you just kind of go around and you tighten them. The valves were not tight. They were actually in spec, except one that was a little loose, but not too loose. I just find it so difficult to believe that Kymco thought that this was a great idea. Engine is in there, engine is nice and tight, and we got the valves adjusted. We're still waiting for parts, so I'm not going to be starting the bike yet, but we're getting near completion. Well guys, that's how you do a valve adjustment on a 2009 Kymco 500 Ri. I was actually very surprised that this was this difficult to do, and now that I know this, and if you were to ask me if I would buy a Kymco, I would actually never buy a 500 just because of the maintenance is so much more difficult on it. And I would probably even steer away from other Kymcos. I'm very surprised that the engineering of this bike that's supposed to be a top of the line bike is this bad. And you can see that in the way it takes so much more time and effort to maintain this. And I think if I was to buy another scooter, it would have to be a smaller Kymco. But I think this experience of adjusting the valves on this steers me away from Kymco in general. This one has got a few more problems that shouldn't be problems, and I've never encountered this amount of problems in a scooter. Even a beat-up scooter like a Honda from the 80s doesn't have as many problems as this. Even the engineering, like just the way the handbrake feels, the way the twisting motion happens, it just doesn't seem like they thought very well about the engineering behind this bike. The filler cap for the gas tank, it's extremely over-engineered. They made it for convenience, but it actually makes it a lot worse to fill, having it up top, and it just creates one more hose that they need to get to the tank. These are the type of things that I look for in motorcycles, and yeah, I can't say I recommend this bike. It's I'm probably gonna fix it up and I'm gonna sell it. I'm not interested in riding it, knowing of the things that I know about it now. You know, I hope I fixed the heating issue on it, but if not, I think I'm gonna have to sell it for as is or for parts or something. But it's just incredibly difficult and time consuming to maintain. And I kind of knew about the maxi scooter thing, you know, with the plastic, but I was not expecting this to be as time consuming to maintain. But I hope you guys learned something. I know I did, so hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.